so what's the order?
Oh, Alex, you'll go second.
Okay. And how long?
How many people?
So thank you all for being here. We are fully aware of the fact that it's the Super Bowl and the fact that it is the start of the, well, we've been in the best season of the year, but like it really starts now. So thank you all for choosing to be here. I hope you enjoyed seeing dogs in tutus and catching plastic from people thrown at 1,000,000 miles per hour at your face. It truly is the best thing. Yeah, so I'm Nikki, this is Michelle. We're on we are a nonprofit now. We got our nonprofit status on Monday. It's official. We provide all of our events for free, and we pay our readers and our workshop leaders. So if you feel compelled out of the kindness of your heart to donate or to buy swag tonight, we've got a little bucket back there. We've got koozies, we've got beanies. Sid is modeling one, thank you, Sid. We have tote bags and coffee mugs. We got all sorts of stuff, but also, you know, a bucket where you can throw a couple bucks if you feel like it. And if you're like, oh man, I don't carry cash, good news, we have a Venmo. How like magical is that? So, yeah, what a coinky-dink. So it's at liminal lit, LMNL-LIT, and all that money will go directly towards paying the amazing people you see here tonight and others that will be here in the future. So, without further ado, we're going to introduce Ryan.
I get to introduce Ryan. I'm so excited.
Let's go.
Ryan Mayer. My darling, my darling. Although I feel like I have known him forever, I met Ryan when he joined our CWW Poetry Workshop a mere 3 years ago. It feels like an ancient thing, just saying. Since then, I have had the pleasure of collaborating and celebrating with him as a vital member of this creative community we are so blessed to be a part of in New Orleans. As a fellow native or history-steeped resident flaneur, I've always felt a special kinship with him as a writer and a reader. But no mere bohemian reiteration, Ryan's voice and work present a deliciously surreal / dark romantic perspective of our combined Creole and Cajun landscapes. Reading his work is often like attending a ghost tour or a quiet courtyard dinner with a descendant of Clive Barker, Poe, and Baudelaire. Ryan's generally formal verses combine decadent imagery, rich diction and lyricism, and a penetrating view of the liminal spaces contained within New Orleans architecture and mythos, the intersections of the past and present, between the carnal and spiritual, and yes, even agony and ecstasy, but also humor, grace, and mercy, in a most perfectly New Orleanian fashion, as Ryan would not have it any other way.
Yeah.
All right. Ryan Mayer is a poet, writer, and third-year MFA student studying poetry at the University of New Orleans. A New Orleans native and loyal graduate, his work has been published in Tilted House Review, 433 Magazine, and more. Please welcome to the stage, Ryan Mayer.
That introduction was more beautiful than anything I'm going to read tonight. Thank y'all kindly for that. I figured I would, it's February, so we're going to start off with some romance poetry, but here's the thing, is that I can't really write romance poetry because someone always does. So, let's begin. A sparrow. Strolling through our favorite park, I saw your favorite animal. A sparrow. I stood as the one tattooed below your collarbone, below a cafe's window. You loved sparrows for how they flutter, from bell towers to eaves, utility poles to bird baths, toward crumbs that away from feet, and how they see cracks and crypts or cavities in oaks as indistinguishable from an open hotel window. You once proposed, a sparrow needs a full chest to accommodate its heart, which would expand until ribs broke without the extra space. Ants crawled through the bird, as through feathered crumbs, its viscum tongue rolled from its beak onto leaves auburn as her hair, and over the one eye I saw, a tache noir, like the tattoo below your collarbone. After dining on eggs, I thought of her. I mount to nap inside this pretty crypt. The fleur-de-lis in its veined marble, its flare beneath the oak's branches. I use shade and makeup to light my skin. Renounced all food, all drink except for brandy. And donned a black suit. Don't all worthwhile venues have a dress code? I sat in front of the crypt. I became a body, breathing, yet deader than the dead. Last night, a rodent bedded between my thighs. This morning, crows, diurnal angels, plucked worms from my face. Just now, a bone-thin mutt made a meal of my atrophied arms. Très exclusif, the grip remains sealed. I flashed my teeth to coax it open, but too much, albeit putrid flesh, obscures my grin. I froze with one, who floated like Malay's Ophelia, in chlorine water until her fingers burned. On her belly and cheeks, feathers hairs glowed gold over goosebumps. The winter sun still felt cold that April morning. I gave in. Or she, still staring skyward, invited me to jump to join her. I then floated as if in a dream, chilled like a libation in a bucket filled with ice. In this city, crypts can be sweltering and often are. And on our backs, surrounded by leaves, we soak together late into the night. The last romance, the singular coquette. Her feet accustomed to terrain where newts encamp with rotten toads, where cypress knees jut like obelisk among headstones, she glides down asphalt and waves hello to pigeons, their bird feeder, in overflowing garbage can. She smiles, gaps in rotten teeth at clouds, twirls the oral of J. Trophy, a fountain's canticle, beat-cooed melody, ditties from passing engines, a performance. She curtsies, hair bounces, feet are floating off an oily scalp like mental orisons rising to angels. I want to be this singular coquette, to transpose the world's mundane discord as a song, to sing, to sway, to charm you, audience, with my decay. And now let's talk about self-mutilation. I turn my hand into a topiary to prove I am not immune to mutilation. My left hand, now detached where the radius abuts the ulna, fixed atop a garden stake. I pluck off with pliers each nail, upsize with shears the thumb, toss it to onlooking corvids. I snip the interdigital fold between the pinky and ring finger to deforest the digits. I strip the petite one of skin, of tendon, leave flesh only around two bulbous ligaments between the base and distal bone. I repeat on each finger, reduce the hand to a quartet of bone-skewered knuckles. See the drool suspended from my chin? The fingers now shaped like kebabs, like lollipops. Oh, my tongue quivers with glace echoes. And as my wide pitter runs across palmar creases, as skin ribbons drift aloft this grassy plot, listen to nearby palmists weep. Cheers. Do y'all know what the breaking wheel is, or a castle wheel? It's an old form of torture / execution where they would strap someone to the spokes, or their limbs rather, between the spokes of a wheel, and they would more or less shatter your bones one by one. And then, if they were feeling merciful, they would drop a hammer on your chest and end you right there, or they would leave you out to die slowly and painfully. Only one person in America has ever been killed like that, and it was right outside the St. Louis Cathedral. This poem's called A Red Wheel. So much depends, notes that poet, upon a red wheelbarrow, yet much weight depended also upon that breaking wheel glazed with red. Jean-Baptiste Boudreau, strapped between our iconic basilica and the Mississippi River. Consider the iron blows upon his hands, his ankles, his wails like garbled psalms echoing, then forearms, feet. Consider him swollen, his body a heap, discolored flesh and bone splinters, saint-like in name and death. Consider him passing in river water beside the white vestments. And here we have a little prose poem which, Ms. Lisa Passel, you heard in one of its earlier drafts. Finding God at an abandoned bomb shelter before the age of 10. One morning, I heard all-knowing mouths speak of the remains of the house on that hill. As howls brushed my reddening skin, I discovered my preference for night, past the neutral ground, grass-covered mound of soggy fingers, right outside a gated community. The shelter seemed more hill than house-like. Graffiti hieroglyphs across a rusted door, its only entrance welded shut. I descended 3 steps and followed dandelions to the top of the shelter, past sun-brittled crawfish heads and cigarette-filled bottles. As foretold, I found concrete flooring, the remains, upon which rested a cardboard mat, upon which rested a dirty blanket, upon which rested stagnant water in Tupperware. The wind nudged me, as groans resounded under my feet, as howls brushed my rending skin. I had found God. I fled until breathless. We have time for a few more?
Yeah.
Sunday, years ago. The New Orleans sun that day had scorched me red, so I praised each balcony I passed beneath, thanked each for its shade. I pressed my palms against Romeo spikes, allowed myself to drip, inhaled the uneven sidewalk's tinted spray, death and rotten oysters. I gathered fronds that spiraled down from wrought iron curlicues, saved them from the asphalt, as though bread blessed by some remorseful demon. Despite my bloody hands, raw souls, and the garden in my pockets, the balconies remained still. My bones forced me deep into black smoke, swirling after, where cognac and rose petals coated obsidian graves, I prayed for a parasol, portable shade, and now my bones swelter inside me. This one's fun. It's called Nightcap Blues. I swear I saw a body on the side of the street. Driving home, I saw a body on the side of the street. A body still as a scared child underneath that sprawling tree. And I swear it looked so quiet below the crepe myrtle, laid on the soft grass below the crepe myrtle. If I looked any longer, I'd have drifted off as well. That night, I heard a funeral parading down the street. That very night, I heard a funeral jazzing down my street. Cornets and cymbals, horns and mourners had roused me from sleep. I shuffled to a window, wiped away tears. At the window I yawned and wiped away tears and saw nothing outside. No hearse, no moon, no parasol, no street. I swear. That night had rendered me blind. That crowd had rendered me deaf. That night I saw no players. Their instruments still rendered me deaf. I brought the bottle back to bed to see what senses I had left. And this final one isn't too gruesome, I promise. It's called, I Found a Half-Chewed Ledger in the Stomach of a Corpse.
Oh my God.
I brought an auger to the autopsy. With it, I burrowed through bone. Perched on surrounding crosses, birds descended. They waited like children for confections, like a congregation for a chalice. They waited to dirt with their beaks the dead, to indulge in effluvium, to eat flesh fruits. I regarded each bit of viscera, each sweet grain, then genuflected as if holding the blooms of an 11 loaf. I could smell metallic notes and ginger when I inhaled. I plucked, I used the luminous of a bin chicken glowing among the crows that approached me, combusted, then bloomed. Burned like a throat coated in a kerosene laced julep. Burned like eyes on a Klieg light. Oh, that familiar sizzling. Burned and bloomed, just like St. John. It bloomed into a sword lily among embers and plumes. And yes, the corollas I plucked at scintillated as they hissed. With their light I saw molten lead and nickel in muscular niches, but no cause of death recorded in that ledger, only a mildewed sketch. Puzzle pieces scattered among prescription pills. Oh, how balm fails to soothe. Thank you all.
All right, give it up one more time for Brian. All right. You all will remember that you've never heard corpses mentioned so much in one reading. Cool. I'm supposed to announce that if you're here for the show in the Twilight Room, they start at 7. But I know all of you in here, so I don't think you're here for that. But if you are, go on. I will only hold it against you a little bit. Okay. Alex Jennings. I first heard Alex Jennings read at last year's Words and Music Festival. I had been familiar with Alex's work and heard his name frequently in our local literary scene, but had never had the opportunity to be transported by his words at a reading. And I was immediately hooked. I heard Alex read again at the New Orleans main library branch downtown, a few weeks later, and then again, a few weeks later after that at our literary festival. And every time, my experience in the audience was the same. Awe, inspiration, encouragement. Alex's work is the kind of work that sustains other writers. It is exploratory, fantastical, out of this world, while also being relatable, firmly planted in our greatest hopes and fears. I listened to The Ballad of Perilous Graves on a long car ride to Arkansas for Christmas, and was enamored with the world Alex had built. Within Alex's debut novel, New Orleans is a city that runs on the magic of song. It is a world where our beloved New Orleans and all of its magic, all of its secrets, are embodied as a thriving and living thing. And right now, in a time where a city can feel so hard to survive in, it was exactly what I needed to remember how lucky we are to be here. So thank you, Alex, for the magic of your words and your worlds, for reminding us of the beauty not only of this place we call home, but this world while also challenging us to believe in a better future, a better way. This is the ballad of Alex Jennings. Ambitious, exciting, and teeming with talent. As Victor LaVale wrote of Perilous Graves, it's funny, wild, witty, and profound, just like its author.
Alex Jennings lives and works in New Orleans with his dog, Karate Valentino. He was born in Germany and raised in, is it Gaborone? Gaborone, Botswana, Paramaribo, Suriname, Tunisia, and Columbia, Maryland. In Columbia. He's a graduate of the University of New Orleans. His writing has appeared in Strange Horizons, Podcastle, and Uncanny Magazine, and he is a regular contributor to the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction. He manages Dream Foundry's Con or Bust program and teaches fiction writing at the Stone Coast MFA program. His debut novel, The Ballad of Perilous Graves, is available wherever books are sold, but most importantly, right here at Ollie's Lounge. So now, everybody give a big welcome, Alex Jennings.
My God. I haven't been up on this stage since I stopped doing stand-up. So I'm going to do a little something different this time. I'm going to read a section from my novel, and then I'm going to read one poem.
Woo!
If I can just find the section I marked. Good Lord. Oh, I know where it is. Sorry, bear with me, folks. My plan for what to read kept changing. All right. So this is a section from chapter 13, and it's called Religion When I Die. All you really need to know about this is that the book is at its heart a sort of blaxploitation Pippi Longstocking adventure set in a version of New Orleans where music is a form of sorcery. And my title character, Perilous Perry Graves, is he's an imagined version of my father at the age of 11. My dad's sitting right there at the sheet. Last May, a few weeks before school ended, Perry had awakened to find a note from Peaches on his bedroom nightstand. "Pool after school, baby," it read in her swooping scrawl that was neither print nor cursive. It would be just the two of them today. Perry's little sister Brindy had dance lessons that afternoon. So as soon as school let out, Perry jumped on the 91 Sky Trolley, heading toward the natatorium in City Park. The windows had been fogged opaque by the tension between the air conditioning and the almost summer heat outside. Droplets of condensation beaded all over the car's red exterior and made it look as if it were sweating from exertion. Inside, a trio of elderly ladies coming from the Chapatulas Walmart squawked and gossiped, filling the car with the scents of candy lozenges and pressed flower perfume. The day before, Mr. Yaw had changed his approach to Perry's piano lessons and given Perry a small keyboard to practice on. About the size of a shoebox, it fit easily into Perry's book sack. The idea was that he would take it out and practice his fingering and chords whenever he had the chance. That way he could practice at home without his folks investing in a real piano before Perry's aptitude for sorcery revealed itself. Mr. Yaw was a white man of medium build who stood just over 6 feet tall. The strangest thing about him, in Perry's opinion, was his bearing. At times he seemed stiff and formal, speaking from somewhere low in his throat, his voice squeezed tight as it traveled up and out. I'm not sure what the issue is, but this is what worked for me as a boy, he said. Having a way to practice idly until the motions became natural to me. Wasn't long before I was locksmithing on an amateur basis. Hearing that made Perry hopeful. There was something about locks that he found compelling. Being able to manipulate their interior mechanisms by playing this or that simple tune, even such modest magic would make Perry proud. As the Sky car scooted along above Esplanade Avenue, Perry sat with the keyboard balanced on his right knee and played chords with the volume off. The trolley glided past the entrance to City Park with no stops before the turn on Orleans. It paused a couple times after the turn, but Perry stayed on until it turned again and descended to the street outside of Delgado Community College. Perry disembarked, ignoring the vibrations at his feet. Something about Delgado had always seemed weird to him, but nobody else had ever said anything, so it was probably all in his head. Perry headed into the park, his keyboard hanging from his left hand, swinging along with his arm. He loved the smell here. There was always a little algal must in the air, but instead of smelling moldy and gross, it smelled alive. The oaks and magnolias joined hands overhead as Perry followed the familiar path toward the pool. He walked automatically, musing over how good it would feel to cut the water with his hot brown limbs, and how school was almost over. That was why it took him so long to notice something wasn't right. Perry slowed down as he realized the light was wrong. It was only 3:30, but out here it looked as if night were about to fall. The sky was cloudless but dim and exhausted, and the trees, the magnolias, the oaks, the willows, the cypress trees, all looked dead and bare. Even the Spanish moss looked washed out and wizened. Perry thought of that scene in The Wizard of Oz where Dorothy and her friends stumbled into the wrong part of the forest where the trees threw apples at them. He made his way into a clearing before he stopped and turned, trying to get his bearings. He saw no landmarks he recognized, no signs that he was even in the park anymore. Beneath his feet, the asphalt bike path had given way to a beaten track without Perry noticing. He was lost. In the distance, Perry saw a figure standing by what looked like a well. From here, it was hard to tell, but Perry thought it might be an older white man. "Hey," Perry called. "Hey, excuse me?" Something about the way the figure's body responded made him think calling out had been a bad idea. Its body tensed, vibrating with a tension like that of a hound. Perry almost expected to hear a howl or a bark. Fear fell on him like a wet blanket. He tried to turn around or at least halt his approach, but his body paid him no mind. It carried him closer to the figure, and closer still. Barefoot, it wore grimy black judicial robes with a soiled powdered wig that had slipped back on its skull to show its stubbly scalp. Its face seemed translucent white, and its skinny bare legs were dirty, badly scratched by brambles or stickers. "You people and your goddamn jungle music," it said. "No home training." Its voice was raspy and ragged, like it had shouted itself hoarse at a Saints game. He was still roughly 25 yards from the judge, but he could hear it whisper just the same. "Him," he told himself. "It's a him. It's not an it." But he knew that wasn't true. "Just a drumming and a hollering. You dirty up the place and vandalize. Paint your little mess over the statues and the walls." Perry hadn't painted anything, but terror broke against his breast to spread across his core, a gelid web. A hollow tremor ran through him as he realized that the judge wore a noose around his neck. Its frayed edge hung down like a necktie or a severed tongue. Its face wasn't just unnaturally pale. It was made up like that of a clown or a mime, and its cheeks were comically rouged. At first, Perry thought the judge wore dark lipstick, but it seemed more like it had ingested something rotten and thrown it back up. A ragged black stain rimmed its mouth and ran down its chin. It stood next to a well. It was a broad, stone-built structure that rose to the judge's waist. As he drew near, Perry became certain that it was the well pulling on him, not the judge, and certainly not his own 2 feet. What if it kept dragging him until Perry went over the side and 2 large, rough sacks lay at the judge's dirty feet? Had they been there before? We want it integrate. We want equality. Now its voice was high and mocking. But you live like scum, like animals. Without us to keep you in line, you kill up your own selves. This was a dream. Perry had fallen asleep on the sky car, and he was having a nightmare. Moving jerkily like a poorly operated marionette, the hanging judge, his name sounded in Perry's mind as if something outside him had whispered it, stooped to grab one of the large black bags lying on the dead grass and heaved it over the lip of the well. More sacks appeared, a pile of them. The judge grabbed 2 more, one in each hand, and threw them in as well. Perry realized now that the bags were big enough, lumpy enough, to hold human bodies or remains. Not full-grown people, but kids at least. Boys. It's only right. I only do what I got a right to. Now he was about 5 feet away from the judge. His legs were still and his feet didn't touch the ground. Perry hung suspended before him, his arms stretched to either side. The worst thing about the figure was not its ratty, disheveled wig or torn and dirty robes, not even the pallor of its face or the rust-brown substance that stained its fingers and its palms. It was its eyes. The eyes were very human, bloodshot, utterly insane, but human, as if this were no evil spirit or malevolent hate, but a man who barely saw Perry, but hated him just the same. Eyes locked on Perry's, the hanging judge reached into its robes and withdrew an object. Without looking away from Perry, it tossed the thing into the well. A foul exhalation rushed out, the dark red-brown stench of blood and human shit. A thrum ran through the ground beneath Perry's feet, and the well trembled, belched a tongue of flame. Acrid smoke poured into the air, rising in a column up into the dimming sky. Just looking at it made Perry's eyes water. Hot tears rolled down his cheeks. Something about the smoke seemed wrong to Perry, and gradually he realized what it was. There were faces and bodies in the smoke, distended and pulled out of shape as they rose into the sky and dispersed. One face rolled its hollow eyes in Perry's direction as it went, its mouth pulled into a moan or scream of anguish. Perry cut his gaze from the smoke back to the judge, as if that would relieve his terror. The judge was bigger now. Before it had been the size of a normal man, under 6 feet. Now it was 7 feet if it was an inch. Its dirty, blackened teeth clenched as it glowered at Perry. You don't need to know who I am, it said. That ain't none of your concern. All you need to know is if I burnt you alive right now, wouldn't nobody in the world miss your black ass. Don't, Perry shouted. Don't burn me, please. Ask real nice, said the judge. Beg. Please, Perry wailed. I didn't do nothing. I'm not a vandal or I didn't do nothing wrong. Too late, crowed the judge. You're mine, mine. Perry forced himself awake to find the trolley headed back uptown. He reached Carrollton and turned left on Orleans, gliding back toward Esplanade. Perry had missed his stop. The old ladies were gone now. So was everyone else. He was alone in the trolley except for the driver. His keyboard had fallen from his lap and lay at his feet, smashed as if it had been thrown from somewhere high. It didn't matter. It had done him no good. The next day, Perry asked his parents to transfer him to a different school, one where he could focus on STEM and discontinue his piano lessons. He couldn't explain his reasoning to anyone else, maybe because it wasn't a matter of reason. He knew that if he told Peaches about his dream, he resigned himself to call it that, though he was dead certain it had not been a dream, that she would have gone looking for the hanging judge, intent on teaching it a painful lesson. Perry didn't think the judge could beat Peaches in combat, but that seemed beside the point. The episode had opened a fissure in him, a red and angry wound that refused to heal. Sometimes Perry would find his attention wandering toward the memory, playing along it like fingers along a scar, except it wasn't a scar. It was still raw, and it ached with a pain that felt as if it had always been with him. It would do no good to beat the hanging judge, even if Peaches could get her hands on it. The judge simply was. It was a fact of life, and the sooner Perry learned to live with that, the sooner the pain would become more unbearable. More than a year later, he still felt this way, and he'd never told a soul. By the way, that section comes directly from a nightmare I had while I was working on the final edits for the book. This poem is dedicated to my father, Hartford Terry Jennings Sr. It's called Exposure. Lately, when we talk, you seem farther from me. You're sleepy, not ill, and I know it. I rejoice, but I'm reminded that when you leave us, inevitably, your presence will recede like a companion car forgotten in rear view until you are gone and gone in a permanent escape. As your mother, my own mother's mother, all of us. And so, I've known spirits. They've brushed against me in my home, interrupting my vision like bodies in water, cloaked in mystery, offset and angled against my understanding and yours. And my former fiance says those are certainly ghosts, but what does that mean? Why have my own dead never returned or spoken to me as they do my mother? I ask this and ask it. I hate this unknowing, but cleave to it. Some questions should not be answered, or what? What happens if the dead reach out and state their business? Elder Hamlet on the ramparts urging revenge, and remove all question from my heart. My heart, I say, because it means more than my mind. My hands mean more than my eyes. I speak through them, tell story through them. I connect my body to others. I penetrate in pleasure. What? Unfinished sculpture, a statue without limbs. Here the sweep of my chest, my masculine tits, forged from sugar and fatted flesh. But why do ghosts appear clothed, like obese and shameful swimmers? For fear? For courtesy to the living? Bare thighs, curved, heavy asses, the obscenity of unclipped toes, a spectral grooming. Except, this is what happens when I ask. My mind turns to foolishness and my nerve erodes. I know you must leave me. Please stay. Please, 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 please stay. Carry me on your fatherly shoulders as the sun rises to light an impossible sky. That's it. Thanks very much.
Let's clap Alex as he walks to his seat. Thank you, Alex. Thank you for that poem. Okay. I know, I'm gonna try not to cry while I read this. Okay. It's a little heavy in here right now. but like in the best way. All right. Jeannie Vanasco's work met me exactly when I needed it. Struggling with my own mental health issues these past few months and the ever-present grief I feel for my parents' deaths, Jeannie's book, The Glass Eye, provided me much-needed solace and an understanding that I am not alone. Her second book, Things We Didn't Talk About When I Was a Girl, made me feel similar, having had my own encounters with assault and trauma. Jeannie's prose is bold and breathtaking. I often had to put my book down to sit with a sentence. Sometimes that sentence would sustain me for the rest of the day, giving me something to chew on to help me grieve or heal or grow. I could sit here and read quotes from NPR or the New York Times or list Jeannie's various awards from Poets and Writers or Time Magazine. No big deal. But I'd rather focus on other things. I'm going to be honest. I did not think Jeannie would agree to be here tonight. And maybe that's not something I'm supposed to say, but we've had some interesting run-ins with established writers, and I was worried Jeannie, being as well-known and decorated as she is, well, I just thought it was a long shot. But instead, I was met with graciousness and kindness, which is always so special when you find it in an idol. They say don't meet your heroes, and that's especially true in literature because the lit world can be cruel sometimes. But every once in a while, you find a writer who is generous, warm, and worth idolizing. I found that person in Jeannie. So thank you, Jeannie, for both your words and your warmth. It is an honor to have you here tonight, and one we will all remember for years.
Jeannie Vanasco is the author of the memoirs Things We Didn't Talk About When I Was a Girl, Tin House 2019, which was named a New York Times Editor's Choice. Yeah, let's go ahead. Yeah, let's do that. And the Best Book of the Year by Time, Esquire, Kirkus, among others. And The Glass Eye, Tin House 2017, which Poets and Writers called one of the 5 best literary nonfiction debuts of the year. Her third book, A Silent Treatment, Tin House, is forthcoming. Born and raised in Sandusky, Ohio, she lives in Baltimore and is an associate professor of English at, is it Towson? Towson, right? Towson University. Thank you, Jeannie. Thank you. Woo!
Thank you so much. Can you all hear me okay? Okay, thank you for that beautiful introduction. Try not to cry. So this evening, I'm going to read a short excerpt from my second book. And just a content warning, so I'm not going to be reading anything graphic, but it is about sexual assault. And I'm going to do what I don't really normally do, and I'm going to play some audio recordings from interviews that I did with the person who sexually assaulted me when we were 19 years old, given my best friend for 4 or 5 years. And obviously the friendship couldn't survive it, but I contacted him 14 years later, and he agreed to go on the record saying, well, it's the least I can do. And did sign a release that I can use the audio. So I will just play short excerpts of that after I read from the very beginning. So there's really nothing else you need to know. And this is the prologue. Early evening. We were in your car at the end of your block at a stop sign. The streets were empty. My window was open because I hated closed windows, probably because I thought my why drive if you can't feel the wind attitude made me profound. We were 16. I just needed to leave my house, you said. With a few classmates, we've been cramming for an exam about waves and optics and contemplating why our accomplished physics teacher taught at our poorly ranked public high school. Cost of living, witness protection. He actually likes Sandusky. When we left, our classmates were writing formulas on their wrists with fine point markers. Let's drive until we hit civilization, I said. You stared straight ahead at something it seemed that couldn't be seen. Somewhere with a bookstore I sat, like a real bookstore, one with a poetry section that's more than one shelf. You squeezed the steering wheel, and suddenly your pale knuckles looked cartoonish, like a badly rendered, unshaded drawing of knuckles. I barely glanced at your face. I sensed you were resisting tears. You told me I was important to you. I told you I knew that. And you said, no, really, you're the only one who understands me. You turned, looked at me, then quickly looked away. I had never seen you cry before. I hadn't seen many teenage boys cry, but I didn't say that. I know you understand this, you said. I just get so lonely. This is probably my favorite memory of us. I know you're sad now, I said, but I promise this will be a happy memory someday. Us at this perfectly straight stop sign. You nodded, and I wonder if I explained my observation, or if my observation was insightful enough to imply its metaphoric meaning as in, let's notice when things are right. The memory stops there. If you were critiquing this, you might say, come on, Jeannie, it's a little too perfect, don't you think? The memory stopping at a stop sign. And then I'm going to read from the very beginning of chapter 1. There are gaps. I already predict failure. I'm afraid he'll say no, or even worse, ignore me. But why wouldn't he agree to speak with me? He owes me that much. I could disguise his identity, change his name. Combing a naming dictionary for some rough translation of friend, I first land on Aldwin, old friend. I picture a knight, an 11th century Norman invader, a sorcerer in a fantasy novel, a president of a Martha's Vineyard men's club, a child of artfully tattooed parents. Between 1880 and 2016, the Social Security Administration reported only 129 babies named Aldwin. My former friend's pseudonym should be common, modern, unassuming. I want readers to know someone with the same name. Phil means friend, but he's not the Phil type. Phil orders everybody drinks. Phil shakes your hand, says, call me Phil. Phil's too casual, too laid back. My former friend may have slacked from one day into the next, but he wavered between anxious and depressed. Philip then? Philip contains friend of horses, but I doubt he ever touched a horse. He preferred the indoors, rarely straying from couch, desk, and bed. His white skin burned easily. Forget name origins. What about the origins of words that are also names, like Nick? Some of Nick's obsolete meanings, reckoning or account, slang for the vagina. But I dated a Nick, in college briefly between boyfriends. I prefer the memories of Nick, him telling me, I could tell you weren't very cultured when I met you, and how have you not heard of broken social scene? And I don't understand why you won't sleep with me if you like me, not influence this project. Though I like the sound of Nick. So I want a monosyllabic word that works as a name and contains a K. Mark, maybe? Its main definition, a boundary, and that's what this is about, boundaries. Perfect. Mark then. Why should I protect Mark? I enter his work address in Google Street View. Instead of his pale yellow office building on an industrial one-way street, I aim my view at the clouds and telephone wires. The wires don't line up precisely. There are gaps of just sky, gaps between communication. I should stop searching for metaphors. Mark and I stopped speaking to one another in college. He was in Ohio studying engineering. I was in Illinois and majoring in journalism. He dropped out shortly after we last spoke, which is not to say I'm the reason, or that what happened between us is the reason, but I hope it's the reason, or rather, what he did to me during winter break of our sophomore year is, I hope, the reason. I can't forget, I was passed out. Mark now manages a camera shop. I recently found an online forum where he answers questions about cameras. Someone asked if a blur in a photo can be good, and Mark replied, if the intent is to give an abstract rendering for some artistic reason, then it's acceptable. When no such intent exists, it's merely bad technique that has caused something that should be sharp to blur. If he could photograph that night, would he blur it? Where would he blur it? My memory is blurry. There are gaps. And then we'll play an excerpt from one of our conversations, and I'm embarrassed to say I like fact checked my memories against his. Like when I was talking with him, I kept deferring to him. I was like, well, I don't know if I remember correctly. How did you remember it? And so I'm embarrassed that I did that, but I thought it was important to include in the book because I think a lot of people have that experience. So play a short excerpt.
Yep,
Oh, is it not working?
It's just locked.
Oh, oh no, sorry. Sorry, everyone. There we go. Okay, they're doing it.
Now you should always put passwords on your electronics. It's a good lesson.
Yes. And I can't remember which conversation this is from. I interviewed him a few times on the phone, a couple times in person, and then again on the phone, but I think this was early on.
What were some of the thoughts that you had, or can you recall having that night, either before or during or immediately after? I know you said you remember me crying.
Yeah.
But do you remember what sort of thoughts you were going through your mind?
What do you think? Yeah, I mean, I remember knowing that I shouldn't be doing this and doing it anyway. And then, like I said, I remember you started to cry and that I laid down. And well, there was a little gap where I laid down, and then I'm thinking maybe, that you were so drunk you wouldn't remember it, or that it was bad, maybe it would be okay. And then you did start to cry, and I remember you whispering, "She raped me," and realizing that it wasn't going to be okay. And then it's just, however many hours of, me realizing what I had just done, and, that it wasn't going to be okay.
Who did I, let's change I use that word, but I use the word rape because I recall not thinking of it that way. Did I just whisper that to no one, or?
Just, under your breath. I just remember you were crying and said that. And it's tough even really to think about.
And then the next one, the audio will be a little bit better. I interviewed him in person. I flew to Ohio, the city where he lives, and you'll hear music in the background. We're in a museum restaurant as I'm recording this, and I chose this excerpt because it kind of makes me cringe how much I tried to put him at ease. It wasn't necessarily a rhetorical device. I think I really was trying to make him feel comfortable. So, like that.
Would you have ever expected this of your?
Of myself, like say when I was 16?
Yeah.
No, I mean I think I thought I would have been better than this, and wasn't. Yeah, I mean I think I thought of myself when I was younger as like the exception to most of the rules. Like, you know, in some ways, like I said, you know, the rules didn't apply to me. Like, you know, I used to, it's not comparable, but like the petty theft, I, you know, pirated anything I could get my hands on, just like to say that I did
Yeah.
online. I don't know, like, it was just like, after that happened, I don't know, I just like, I hated myself for it for a long, I mean, it, I don't know what I'm trying to say.
But like you hated yourself for it afterward.
Yeah.
And you kind I remember you mentioning that you thought maybe I was so drunk that I would forget, or like and then you
Yeah.
realized like.
Which I almost feel worse about thinking that,
That I might forget.
that it would just go away.
Well, but that's a realistic, I mean, that's
Yeah.
an honest, I appreciate your honesty. Like really appreciate it. So it's just, I mean, has it kind of been helpful anyway to know? I don't feel
Yeah.
rage, actually, like I wish you well. I don't, like it makes me.
Thank you.
I mean, like the ethical thing to do is this, right? To agree, and the fact that you agreed demonstrate, I don't know, like it demonstrates.
Sounds like well, I guess I'm just glad that you're getting something out of it, you know, that it's helpful to you.
Mm-hmm.
That part is helpful to me.
And then, I don't want to give him the last word, so I'm just going to read a short paragraph. And then I'm going to read a very short passage from something that's in progress. It's under contract. It's a mess. So it's going to be short because I didn't want to put you through all that. But I also wanted to try reading something new. But so as not to give Mark the last word, this is from later in the book. Processing my feelings is hard to do authentically because this project, the thing I intended to get at the truth, is getting in my way of understanding my feelings. In writing about this material, I feel compelled to turn off my emotions so as to remain focused. But this book also gives me some sense of control. I can take charge of the material. I can include and cut what I want. And then the iPad.
Oh,
Yeah. Sorry. It's this thing that I'm gonna read. This is my partner, Chris. Hi, Chris. He has not even read this. It's very, very new. I was gonna print it, but I was making edits to it up until the last minute. Okay. So the prologue, which is very short. Write the truth, my mom tells me. You mean your months and months of the silent treatment, I ask? Otherwise it wouldn't be honest, she says, or interesting. And this is the beginning. My mom's silences, 2 weeks here, almost 6 months there, over the 5 years since she moved in, amount to 1.5 years at least. After one of her silences, I told her, When you don't talk to me, it's all I can think about. I feel sick constantly. Next time I do it, she said, yell at me. Tell me to go to hell. I can't do that, I said. Yes, you can. I'm not telling you to go to hell. Why not? Because, I don't know, just don't do it again. But she did it again. Then she did it again. And now, maybe, again. Until she moved here, my mom and I spoke on the phone almost every day, often twice a day. She usually waited for me to call her. Sometimes when she called first, she asked, "Am I interrupting?" This began shortly after I left Sandusky, Ohio at 18 for a university just outside Chicago. My dad died a month later. She increasingly talked about how miserable she was. She hated her job. You know, I'd make more at McDonald's than I make at the library. She hated her house. I wish it burned down when the animals and I aren't home, or I wish the city would buy it off me and turn it into a parking lot. She missed my dad, but I wouldn't give to have him back. She missed me. I wish I could live near you. I hate this stinky town. I'm so proud of you for getting out. I was never brave enough or smart enough. On weekends, I sometimes toured open houses surrounding my campus, picturing how she'd arrange her things, even though I knew these tours were pointless. All the houses cost 6 figures, and back then I believed only rich people owned houses that expensive. I wondered if realtors could tell I was lying when I said, my mom is looking to buy a place here as an investment. After graduation, I moved to New York, and for about a decade, I lived in a series of rent-stabilized apartments that I could barely afford. My mom loved to visit. She had never ridden a plane before. I wish I could move to New York, she told me. It's never boring. She reminded me that if it ever became too expensive, I could move back home. You wouldn't have to worry about rent or groceries, she said. You could have all day to write. She stopped mentioning this after Chris and I started dating, but I knew the offer was still there. One evening, while staying with Chris and me for the first time, she told him, you know, I had to sleep with one eye open when Jeannie was a teenager. What are you talking about? I asked. She described a difficult girl so unlike the salutatorian voted most involved. I told her I didn't remember my adolescence the way she did, and she laughed and replied, oh, I remember. It's hard to argue with, I remember. Later, I told Chris, I don't know what that was about. Later, my mom told me, I like Chris. He doesn't put on airs. He's common, easy to talk to. I'm glad you're with him. To be common is, to my mom, one of the highest compliments. After he and I moved to Baltimore for my teaching job, we rented a row house that cost the same as our shotgun apartment in New York. I told my mom, now we can live in the same city if you still want to do that. Baltimore is so much more affordable than New York. Then she said what she often said, I just want to be close to you. Whatever I did during her previous silences amounts to vague memories. I graded student essays, read books, talked with friends, cleaned the house. But underneath all that was sadness and anger. Underneath seems right, as my mom's apartment used to be the basement. I spent most of my time with Chris and the cats. I barely wrote, yet I went through my days as if writing, searching for meaning and details that might otherwise seem insignificant. The time of day she took out the trash, the speed at which she walked through the backyard to the alley, the amount and type of mail that arrived from her. Chris or I would leave the mail in the laundry room that she walked through whenever coming and going. For private stairwells off our shared deck, for other stairwells behind the door in our dining room. Even the simplest tasks for me, getting the mail, taking out the trash, loading the washing machine, became full of agonizing suspense. Would she see me? If so, would she pretend she hadn't? Sometimes I wondered if she spent entire days indifferent to the silence. I imagined her waking up, drinking her decaf coffee, calling her friends in Ohio, and laughing about some gossip back home without once thinking of me. If she says back home when we're out walking or shopping, I sometimes don't know if she means our house or Sandusky. After I bought our house, a contractor installed insulation to muffle the noise between the first floor and the basement, which in only 2 months he transformed into an apartment for her. She says the insulation works. But when I'm on the first floor, I can usually hear her. She's down there watching TV, playing with her dog or cat, or talking on the phone. Today, though, I hear nothing below me. I press my ear against the dining room floor. If it collapsed, I'd land in her living room. I know there's a dead metaphor about the floor dropping out from under you, or maybe it's the rug being pulled out from under you. The rug, definitely. The floor, possibly. I must be messing with dead metaphors because I feel dead. A therapist might say, dead isn't feeling, because the dead don't feel, do they? And isn't that what makes losing someone hard? You feel so much for someone who suddenly feels nothing at all. But if your mother pretends that you don't exist to her and that she doesn't exist to you, how else are you supposed to describe that? My floor rubbed out above me, onto me. Even if somebody doesn't know the layout behind the metaphor, my floor, her ceiling, better if they don't actually. It encapsulates the disorientation that I feel whenever she inflicts silence. Thank you all for listening to something very much in progress.
Let's hear it one more time for everyone. Yes! Thank you all for being here. Thank you for reading. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Alex. It's truly, truly special. So we have some events coming up. Tomorrow, which is Monday, at 6 p.m. on Zoom, we have the Art of Compressed Fiction with Emily Choate. She's the fiction editor for Podunk Review. It is free. It's a fiction workshop. If you want to learn about how better to compress your narratives, get online with us. The link to sign up is bit.ly/liminal fiction. You can check out our Facebook, it's on Eventbrite, all places. To sign up for that workshop, you have to sign up to get the Zoom link because we'll get Zoom bombed if we just put it out there. So please register. Hasn't happened to us, but it has happened.
I remember that meeting where we got Zoom bombed.
That was awesome. Yeah. And then Wednesday, March 8th, if you're going to AWP, we have a booth at AWP, and we have an off-site reading. It's City Feet, Swamp Mouth, a Louisiana Regional Off-Site Reading. We've got Eric Tran, Remy Recchia, Matt Gabbard, Danny. Where'd Danny go? Oh, God, of course. Well, Danny, who's in the bathroom, will be reading. Melissa Crow, Aaron McCoy, Eric Francis, so many more people. It's going to be amazing. So it's a reading between Bayou, New Delta, Bear Review, Tilted House, Rougarou, and Podunk. So please come by if you are at AWP. That's Wednesday, March 8th. Again, that's also on Eventbrite. It's also on Facebook. It's also on the AWP page. And if you can't come by the booth. We're by the bathrooms, so you have to see us at some point. Hopefully. Otherwise, I'm concerned about how much water you're drinking. And then our March events, March Poetry and Pie, March 16th, 6 p.m., Daniel Lee and Allison Alsup, two local writers that we love so much. And then Sunday, March 19th, 6 p.m. here, Kirsten Renaud will be reading. She's celebrating the release of her newest chapbook, her nonfiction chapbook. Charisma Price will be reading. She is celebrating the release of her book, I'm Always So Serious, which comes out in March. This will be her first official book release after the book comes out reading, which is really exciting. And Maurice Carlos Ruffin will be reading from his book that just got a publishing deal contract. You can tell I'm a fiction writer. I'm like, what's that called? His book was accepted for publication by Penguin Random House, which is exciting. So it'll be his third book, and he'll be reading from that. So come out March 19th at 6 p.m. Have an amazing Mardi Gras. We love you. This is Danny. Everyone clap for Danny. She was just in the bathroom. Now she's back. She's reading at AWP. Okay, have an amazing night. Swing dance happens right afterwards, so we got to clear the floor and pay our tabs. We're going to go across the street to the arcade. They have an amazing beer selection and cider selection. They also have arcade games, which is fun and campy. And then there's a barbecue place on the way. So if you're hungry, stop by there. Or pay a couple bucks and you can swing dance. Sid's going to do that. You can hang out with Sid. All right, we love you. Thank you so much. Bye. Bye.